We can build a treehouse in the pine trees. We can keep our secrets buried underneath. Wildflowers crush between your fingers, clinging to the wild things that raised us. Compass point you home, calling out from the east. Compass point you anywhere closer to me. If we make it out alive from the depths of the sea, compass point you anywhere closer to me. Where you are, I will be. Miles high in the deep. Where you are, I will be.
Hello! So, this is the Foxeer Foxwhoop 25, or at least my take on it. And of course, this is basically a 2.5 inch cine whoop. And like most of these, it can carry a stripped hero or Insta 360. And I got this little frame and I've built it up, and my build is pretty much very similar to Foxeer's own. Foxeer are using 1404 3850 kV mortars. I'm using 1404 T-mortar 3800 kV mortars. They're using a Foxeer Reaper all-in-one. I'm using a Diaton Mamba F722, and I'm using obviously a Caddix Vista and a Caddix Nebula Pro Nano as well. So the ports are all sort of pretty much the equivalent of what comes in the actual Foxwhoop 25 BNF that you can buy. And I got this just for sort of something to do, really. It's been a while since I've done a build and I just fancied something, and because I had the components lying around from other quads that I've been tinkering with, it was just a straight and easy thing to drop them into this. And I've got to say, as these things go, the frame is an absolute peach. The ducts are made presumably from some sort of injection molded polycarbonate or similar, and they're basically, the material is what appears to be pretty much prop material. And Foxeer claim that they're giving a lifetime warranty on these ducts, although I would point out that I bought this from Unmanned Tech in the UK, and there's no mention of that warranty. So whether that only applies if you buy it directly from Foxeer or whether it's just selected retailers, I don't know. But having sort of put maybe sort of 20 or 30 packs through this, hit trees, clonked into concrete, etc., it's not really showing any signs of giving away. So while it certainly isn't going to last forever, they're certainly robust. And the whole frame is, I suppose, simple and well designed and well thought out, and it's light because of that. Basically, all these things, what we basically have is 4 arms and a little plate, and then everything sits below it. So you sort of end up building this without the ducts, and then sort of drop the ducts over the top, or should I say push the ducts up and attach the mortars underneath. And it's quite a sort of spacious thing as these builds go. There's quite a bit of space between the Vista and the all-in-one flight controller, and the whole thing is just sturdy and rigid, and it's pretty light too. If you look at the sort of comparables to this one weighs about 128 grams. Its competitor, the Gap RC version, I think is a good 10 or 15 grams than that, and iFlight's latest ProTech 25 is a good sort of 50 or 60 grams heavier than this. So it really is a sort of lightweight version of other quads on the market, and it's, as I said, it's well designed. The prints that you get with it are really nicely printed. That's obviously, I've redone them, but that's the original antenna mount for a crossfire antenna, and obviously you could have antenna tubes in there. And you get two camera mounts for 14mm or 19mm camera. So if you're running DJI, Nebula Pro Nano, or probably the original DJI camera. I'm using a different mount, and the reason for that is in my initial flights, which in fairness were in really windy conditions, and this particular Nebula Nano has got damaged threaded screw insert, so I can't really attach it particularly firmly. But using this mount, I did have some jello. So given that this, although very well printed and pretty sturdy, certainly sturdier than my prints, the first thing I did is basically redesign the camera mount. And the reason for that is when I was building this, because of the way that the Mamba sort of is laid out, I ended up with my battery wire up here, and I wanted to sit the capacitor that I'm using, which is one of these guys, a Panasonic, what is it? Panasonic 470 25 volt. I wanted to sit that sort of underneath the camera here. And initially I just sort of used some 3M foam tape to lock it into place, but I wanted a more elegant solution. So I've been sort of playing around in Thingiverse, sorry, should I say in Tinkercad, and because of the jello issues, I thought I'd give the camera some more stability. So I've just been playing around. So if you look at the actual frame, I've made basically an inset which goes in and slots into the front of that frame there, and then I've just added on side plates to give it a little bit more stability, and then my capacitor basically fits in there, and the whole thing then just becomes a little bit sturdier. And since I've done that, I haven't really had any issues with jello unless it's really, really windy. Same on the back, because if I'm running a little quad like this, I want a buzzer. My days of hiking and spending hours looking for my quads are over. If the battery disconnects, what I've done is just attached a little self-powered buzzer and wedged it underneath this mount here, and then just put the ELRS receiver on top. I've got a little Foxeer lollipop micro. Not particularly great antennas these. The normal lollipops are great, but the micro version's a little bit shoddy, but it's nice and light, and more importantly the coax cable is really, really short, which is what I wanted in this stage. So obviously this whole thing comes in a nice little package. We've got again this sort of injection molded naked GoPro holder. It also comes with a different design one, which I'm presuming is probably for an Insta360 or something like that, a 360 Go 2. And the whole thing just smacks of real sort of simplicity. There's no obvious weaknesses for it. Obviously it's a little bit of a pain to put together, and when you're building it you need to make sure that you leave your vista wires pretty long, because you're going to have to connect your vista to this plate and then sort of push it in and screw it in. But once it's all together, it works out really nicely, and I love the fact that there's space for a decent sized cap and buzzer as well. And as I said, because it's so light, when you come down to how it flies, the honest answer is it flies amazing. And I say amazing with a lot of caveats, which are basically amazing for a ducted quad, which is a 2.5 inch and pretty heavy, or certainly not toothpick weight. It doesn't have any of those weird and annoying characteristics. It doesn't sometimes sort of jerk and want to flip out. It doesn't suffer from a lot of prop wash. It will dive down without any sort of weird habits when the wind kicks it, and it just flies really, really nicely. I initially flew it on Betaflight 4.29 and it was fine on that. I've since flashed it to Betaflight 4.3 now it's been released, and it flies even better. The tune is one I've basically plucked out my arse. I don't really know a huge amount about Betaflight 4.3. Obviously I predominantly fly KISS and KISS Ultra and FETEC, so 4.3 has largely passed me by, but I played around with it, amended the filters and a few other bits and bobs, and I've got to say it flies an absolute treat. It's so stable. In the footage that you're looking at, I've gone to this sort of woodland simply because it's so windy, sort of hitting gusts of 20-25 miles an hour, and a quad this size is going to struggle. But even on those sort of winds and gusts hitting it, okay, you notice it drifting sideways, etc. if you're high up, but it holds its authority and it doesn't sort of wiggle and shake around. It's really confidence inspiring. When it comes to batteries, I've flown it on 3 different types. The super heavy China Hobbyline 850s, which weigh an absolute ton, GMB 750s and GNB 550s. And it handles any of these batteries absolutely fine. But if you want to get sort of cheeky with it and make it move and try and do a sort of bit of light freestyle, this is the size battery that you want, simply because it saves so much weight versus these, and that weight is hugely noticeable. While it flies fine on this, low throttle authority on a much lighter battery is much better. It's much more capable and happy of flipping and rolling and doing all those things, and the flight time isn't massively different. This little quad is 128 grams. If you're lugging this around, you're adding so much weight to it that, albeit it's a much bigger battery, it's not really getting you a huge amount of difference. So if you're pottering around, you'll probably get sort of 5 minutes or so on this sort of size battery, maybe sort of 3.5-4 minutes on this size of battery. Obviously, if you give it death, you're going to be lucky to get 2 minutes and 3 minutes accordingly. When you're carrying a Hero, or in this case I was using a Hero 8, clearly we're adding a ton more weight, and in that basis either of these are absolutely fine. There's no real sort of benefit to running a smaller battery when you're lugging around a Hero, etc., because you're not really going to be doing anything interesting when it comes to maneuvers. So you might as well battery up and use the heaviest one that you can. So that's it really for me. I think it's a fantastically designed little quad. There's no sort of fancy features as such. It just flies exceptionally well, and I think that's down to basically the frame and it just being relatively lightweight for a quad of this size. So props off to Foxeer. I love the fact that it doesn't have those silly anti-vibration mounts and all that guff that the Geppo SC Cinelog 25 has. There's no need for those. If you're using an Instago 2 or even a stripped Hero, you've got stabilization that you can use to get rid of any sort of vibrations, and it's pointless adding weight on a quad where you really need to get it as light as you possibly can. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with mine, and I'd imagine that anybody who buys it from Foxeer as a BNF is going to be equally chuffed, because they seem to be kicking out pretty sound electronics these days. All I would say is be prepared that if you've got a lot of vibrations, you might need to change these mounts. I'll flash up the Betaflight 4.3 settings, PIDs and filters that I was using, and because I'm using ELRS, I'm using 250 Hertz, and I've chosen the cinematic option simply because on the freestyle preset I didn't like it. It felt, the sticks felt a little bit twitchy for me on a quad this size. But that is it. I shall leave you with a bit more flying. Cheers guys, thanks, bye bye.
We can build a treehouse in the park.